I'm back.
You're back.
How's it been?
Well,
What's going on, romance?
you're a troublemaker. You, ma'am, are going straight to romance jail.
Yeah, I've been away for 2 weeks, and I have seen people all over the country, and I've seen Jen. I saw so many firebirds.
It's so awesome, isn't it?
So many people came out, and not just to Fated Mates Live. People who went to Fated Mates Live then saw me again in Indiana.
I mean,
what are you doing?
What else are you going to do? It's the Midwest and just drive around. They probably came on their riding mower.
The event in Indiana was real nice. It was with Wild Geese Bookshop. Hi, everybody at Wild Geese. They want to do a Fated Mates Live. We've already been to the Midwest. We got to spread the love. Anyway, it was at Wild Geese Bookshop, and it was real nice. It was at an Indianan. Is that a thing? Indianan doesn't feel like a right word, but we're going to go with it.
I'm like, what are you about to say? I don't know what's following.
An Indianan vineyard.
Sure.
Now, here's the thing. I didn't expect to find a vineyard in Indiana.
You can grow grapes anywhere, Sarah. I don't think that's actually true.
What do you know about grape growing?
Listen, everybody.
You saw that one movie with Keanu Reeves, and now you're an expert?
I'm actually cracking myself up. The authority with which I said that. Like,
you really did.
Yeah, I don't know. Actually, I don't know anything about growing anything anywhere. Then that's how it should be.
Point is, they took me to a grapevine in Indiana. It was real nice. I was with Rebecca Bowman at the Lilly Library. Well, we were at this vineyard, but Rebecca came from the Lilly Library. They are the head of collections there. And they talked about collecting, which I love to have people talk about, because whenever anybody says, hey, you don't have to be a rich asshole to collect books. You can just be a person who loves romance. I always think that's transformative. I love watching people's faces when they hear that and input that. So Rebecca did that, and then and it was great. We had a lovely time. One of the things Rebecca said was, in their opinion, some of the coolest collections are collections made by people who love a microtrope. And so what they do is they collect every romance novel with a mustache on the cover. That's a pretty terrific idea. So here's my question, Jen. What microtrope would you collect? Because I know you and I are collecting Trailblazers.
Right.
But that's not the same.
You know what I thought? What I thought this once would be, that it would be really, actually, really fucking funny. And this is a good transition to today's topic. If I actually collected books with real fossils.
Wow, that is the most Scorpio fucking
Isn't
answer.
It?
You're like, I fucking hate fossils. They suck. And here's my collection of this thing that I hate.
Yeah, it really is. It's very me to have thought that. And actually,
that's a deep Scorpio answer.
Kind of have low-key started doing some of it a little bit. I'm like, here's the story of Robert's book about an actual paleontologist or whatever. So, yeah, I know. I'm real ashamed of that answer, but it is, in fact, such a me answer that I'm just going to go ahead and tell you that's I think it. The other thing I collect, but it's kind of messy, and I feel like I have to really be more thoughtful about it, is I have a pretty robust collection of books that are about writing romance. Because every decade or so, someone writes a book that's and so a lot of them, though, are from thrift books or, I would not say that these books are all in great shape. Because at first I just was like, oh, I'd be really interested in what these have to say. And then I kind of thought, oh, this actually would be really cool to really collect good copies of these books and sort of have so those are my two answers.
I had been thinking about this since the conversation with Rebecca. And then this morning I was looking at Instagram, and I found this woman on Instagram, and she collects copies of Wuthering Heights. And her whole Instagram is her driving around the United Kingdom. She's English. And every tiny little bookstore, used bookstore in every little town, she goes in and looks for a copy of Wuthering Heights. And then if she has that copy, she doesn't buy it. But if it's something she doesn't have, she buys it.
That's pretty cool.
And now she has 57 copies of Wuthering Heights, which is, again, I don't think I have a book that I like enough for that. But that is I really honestly was like, oh, that's a cool thing to do.
I do have 3 copies of Dreaming of You.
Oh, me too. Okay.
No, I have the one with the step back and then the current one. And then I have the one that's like the little manga one.
Oh, I don't have that manga one. But I do think what's interesting about picking a book, if you love a classic, the way this woman obviously loves Wuthering Heights, then that's a very cool thing, because also I think eventually you're going to find really interesting versions of it that nobody knew existed. Versus, Dreaming of You. We kind of know what exists.
Right. I mean, yeah, with something like that, there's limitless numbers of them, I would imagine.
Yeah. And then maybe one day you stumble into something that's really special. There are only 5 of these, Welcome, everyone, Fated Mates. I'm Sarah McLean. I read romance novels and I write them.
And I'm Jennifer Prokop, a romance reader and editor. And this week, we're back on our bullshit.
Well, interestingly, before we start, we are back on our bullshit. We're back on our bullshit, everybody. Welcome, new readers, new listeners. If you came to an event with me for the last 2 weeks and then thought, gosh, this event was so fun, I would love to have her in my ear holes every Wednesday. Please meet Jen.
Hi, everybody.
And we talk about romance novels every week, so that's fun. One of the things, though, that you didn't mention is that for your birthday / Christmas / some holiday, I gave you a collection from the Lilly Library Romney catalog. And that's really related to this.
Yeah, it is. Because, wait, hold on. Let me grab them. I'm going to roll away for a minute. And here they are, right behind a picture of you.
Oh, see, gate kept by me. She's pulling them out. Everybody, you can't see this, but she's literally yanking them off the bookshelf.
The career novels. What was the actual...
The publisher is a weird... Okay, so I'm going to describe them while you figure out what they are. So there was a special collection of... These are from like the 50s and 60s of early romances. They're like category length. They're a little shorter than category length. And they are specifically about women in careers. Because Jen likes a job.
I do.
And so what do you got?
Oh, Airmont. The Airmont Career Series. Airmont, I think, is the publisher.
And they're all like 35 cents, the cover. That's how you know. So interestingly, Rebecca Romney told me with these pulp romances or these like early collections, they never changed the inside printing. So it still says first edition on the inside print page.
The way you can tell is the price. The way you
can tell is the price. So if it's 35 cents or 40 cents, then it is a first edition.
I mean, Barbara Owen, girl reporter. Susan Brown, camp counselor. They don't all have a name. Sometimes they're just like, Captain Jane.
Captain, is she a pilot?
No, it's a boat, Sarah. She had to compete.
Did you like how she said that? Like,
no,
you idiot. It's a boat.
It's a boat. There is an air stewardess. I don't think.
I guess lady pilots were not a thing.
I mean, women wanted to be pilots. They just didn't let them. Because, Amelia Earhart, Sarah, come on.
Well, she did kill herself. I mean, it wasn't intentional, I don't think. She just flew into the sea.
So did a lot of men. That didn't stop them.
That's true.
Time to deal with your internalized misogyny, Sarah.
I will say something that I discovered. I had because of misogyny moment on a Delta airline during the last 2 weeks, because Delta is very proud of the fact, I'm a Delta flyer, everyone. Delta is very proud of the fact that they are the first airline that has reached 100 years in flight. So this is not sponsored by Delta, but should be. Anyway. Just throw some extra miles in my account, Delta. But one of the things that they're doing now is, like the pre-flight video. Now, on some planes, they don't. It's not a person who does it who does it over the intercom with like a seatbelt in the aisle. It's on the actual seat back in front of you on the screen. And the current Delta screen video is they have a bunch of people, flight attendants, wearing the uniforms of the decades.
Oh, that's fun.
Which is very cool. And actually, if you're out there and you're interested in fashion, I'll see if I can find. I'm sure this is on YouTube. I'm sure it is. And like, if it is, we'll put a link. But one of the things that's really interesting is like major fashion designers, like known fashion designers, designed the Delta uniforms over the course of like the 50s and 60s and 70s. But of course, the first like 5 people who speak are women. And then in the 80s, a man speaks. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. This is the first man
to be a flight attendant.
Because of misogyny. Those rich men did not want flight attendants to be men. They wanted flight attendants to be beautiful women.
Well, they were called stewardesses.
They were.
So, and in fact, there is a book, Air Stewardess. Here's the cover.
Ooh, that's her. She has a big giant face on that cover.
She does have a big giant face. Exciting assignment Linda Martin had asked for, and to her surprise was given the glamorous Tijuana, Mexico City run. To Linda, Mexico was an exciting foreign country, and there was the dashing Carlos. Patrician, handsome, wealthy, far more fascinating than American Pete Randolph, reporter and would-be novelist. The other side of the coin were the flights over the Sonora Desert. Linda hated the desert, and her feeling was to be prophetic, for this vast, unfriendly expanse suddenly became a menacing and frightening challenge.
A crash.
In her life. I mean, I fucking hope so.
Amazing. A crash, and there you are with Pete and Carlos.
Marguerite knew the job. A lot of these seem to have like a bit of a
why choose situation.
Yeah, I think they probably choose. You know what's funny? I'll put it in show notes. I was interviewed last week. A TV show called The Summer I Turned Pretty is back. And I had a really interesting conversation with a reporter from the New York Post about like love triangles and fiction. And just kind of like their purpose and storytelling. And the best part about it was that I kind of took like a sideways turn and talked about how annoying it is that Stephanie Plum never chose between Ranger and Morelli.
Janet Ivanovich is going to come to your house.
Whatever. Janet Ivanovich is like lives in a rich place.
Janet Ivanovich owns a state.
She does. She has 7 of her own pools. She doesn't need to come for me. But what was not cool is I did was sort of like in adult romance now, I would just fully expect them to all end up as a throuple. And she, for whatever reason, did not include that. But my guess is because apparently this is a TV show. It's a TV show about teenagers. So obviously that is.
You've crossed a line.
I did. What a shock. Anyhow.
Listen, so we're talking about careers today. Not really, though. We're actually talking about competence porn today. But we probably didn't title the episode Competence Porn because of God.
And Republicans? I don't know. Okay.
Fated Mates becomes banned in 17 states. I mean,
we shouldn't laugh because
we shouldn't. Listen, we shouldn't laugh, but fine.
I literally, listen, speaking of competence, Eric, you can just keep this in, but like you do have the entire podcast backed up somewhere, right?
Yes, we do. We do. It's
okay.
Not in like Iron Mountain or anything, but well, there are 2 things. First of all, where did Steve Amadown work?
I think it's actually, I have to contact him. I think it's actually at the University of Michigan, but who knows?
Okay. There for a little while there was a university. See, we
don't even know.
Part of the challenge is that we should know this and we don't, right? But maybe this is where we're
looking incompetent right now, Rebecca, and it's fine.
Listen, Do as we say, not as we, or do as we read, not as we do. Maybe I will email Rebecca and ask them if perhaps the Lily Library would like to back up Fated Mates. But we have a hard copy, we have a hard disc somewhere, and then there's a disc in a fireproof safe somewhere.
See?
And look at that. I don't know how often we update that disc in the fireproof safe, but we have something.
I just think in our current reality, maybe we should do it
but
more
also,
often.
no, the whole thing is hosted in the UK because of the new tool we use.
Nice.
Here we are. We're just having a business meeting now. Eric's going to be like, what the fuck, you two?
Hey, listen.
This is good. You guys, honestly, if you're out there and you have a podcast, Eric will take this out if it's not real. If it's left in, we're going to assume I'm correct, which is if you have a podcast out there, there are tools from Canada and other places where you can actually use those tools to host the audio files, in which case, congratulations. Fascism hasn't come for you yet.
Yet. Okay.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is sponsored by Wattpad Press, publishers of Z.W. Taylor's The Pack, the third in the Moonblood saga.
Okay, so if you love paranormal movies and TV shows like Underworld or Twilight, you are going to love this addicting series. Charlotte has finally found her place and settled into the Thunderhead Werewolf Pack in backwoods Alaska. She spent the past year happily working as a tracker, spending her downtime with her best friend and roommate, or catching up with her mentor. And there's a lot of magic in the forest surrounding where the pack lives, and rogue wolves keep appearing all over the state. And so for the first time in a long time, even though her life feels safe, she knows that something's about to happen. So the surprise arrival of someone new turns the world she's grown to love upside down. Now Charlotte is faced with new challenges and truths that make her question everything around her. She wonders if it's possible to protect the people she loves while also following her heart. She decides she has to try, but every attempt at happiness is derailed because of these outside threats, including an old enemy reappearing. So battle lines are going to be drawn, and a final epic fight seems inevitable.
You can read The Pack and the entire Moonblood saga right now in print, ebook, or audiobook. If your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy those books. Thank you to Z.W. Taylor and Wattpad for sponsoring this week's episode. Anyway, so we are talking about competent characters in romance.
Yes.
And why they are so sexy.
So, okay, part of this is, or number one is, it is interesting always to talk about jobs in romance. And it's been a while since we've sort of like kind of broadly talked about them. Although I think we talk about them in some ways all the time.
A lot, because you love a job.
I do. Which is interesting because
jobs are like animals. They mean something.
Yeah.
Or they should.
Now, the thing is it should tell us something about the character. Like, I don't actually care. The reason, like, the fossils rant is sort of, like, hilarious is because my point is like, I don't actually want to learn about actual fucking fossils, but I do want to learn about the characters and why they love them, right? Or why this is an interest or whatever, right? Like, if, in your book, people are literally, like, working with spreadsheets. I shouldn't actually ever have to learn. I shouldn't ever learn something about how a spreadsheet really works in a romance, right?
Okay.
But if somebody is like, this work is satisfying or safe or whatever, right? So I think it's always like, yeah, it's about always in romance about character. So part of the reason that this is interesting and we came up with this topic is we kind of are constantly like, what's an old episode we've done that we should update? And sometimes we look back at like the photo array and we're like, what would we possibly be talking about with this set of books? That would actually be really funny. Like, put up a photo array and be like, what was the topic? And we'd be like, I have no idea, right?
Exactly.
So that's kind of interesting. But also because we were talking about, I've been re-listening to Storms because Julia Whalen. And I was like, I love a fixer. Like,
same.
Competence porn, purely distilled. And And then we were like, are there other fixers in romance or other fixers as
And then
characters,
we immediately named a bunch. And then we went to season 2, episode 8, which is called Competence and Careers in Romance. And we looked at the photo array and we were like, what the fuck is all this?
What are all these books? This makes no sense. We have to do it over.
I mean, listen, we don't, it's not like we re-listen. So maybe we were super smart in that. We probably, listen, we were obviously very intelligent when we spoke about all those books in relationship to competence and careers in romance. But the reality is literally none of the books that we had on our list were on this list. And I've read at least 2 of them from before this. So I don't understand. But here we are. And this is why.
Yeah, that's what makes it fun. It's like a snapshot of what we're reading now.
We've lived a generation of romance. And now we have other thoughts about it. So let's talk about this. I want to talk about careers first. And then let's get into competence, right? And fixers. Because I think, like what you just said, careers matter, right? Careers are supposed to say something about a character. I think right now we're in this place in romance where we are seeing a lot of the same careers again and again. And I do think, for what it's worth, many of the careers that we're seeing are sort of tagged as competence. So, like, for example, the wedding planner, right? We are seeing a lot. And when I say a lot, I mean, you guys, if you're writing a contemporary and you're writing a wedding planner, there are many, many wedding planner books out there. And so, like, I would just sort of coach you as like your friend. Think about whether wedding planning is an essential job in this particular book, because they are everywhere. But I actually think what wedding planning, for example, tags or like codes as is like a deeply competent person, right? This is a person who is entrusted with the most, quote, the most important day of a person's life. And so, like, that sense of like preparedness and organization and a sense of being able to like manage any snafu or like put out any fire is a way that we can sort of like really like shorthand a heroine almost always, right? Like, I don't think I've ever read a hero who's a wedding planner. That would be fun. But this is how we shorthand a heroine who has at least like one part of her life together.
Okay, let's talk about not all wedding planners, but
yeah,
part of the problem with that is, right, there's a point at which it can kind of transfer over into cliche, right? Like, your kind of authors might be assuming like, okay, people are just going to see this as like, here's a person who's organized and therefore competent, and I can like kind of move past this.
Right.
But I also think that there is a difference then between people who choose a job or career to tell us something about the character versus people who choose a job or career to set up something about the plot. Right? And so she's the wedding planner and he's the best man or whatever, right? Or something like.
Sure. If the wedding is essential to the plot, and then you said best man. I was like, he's the groom, Jen.
Right. Well, of course, but I didn't want to get in trouble right away. But yeah, right. I mean, so then it's just so that they can have a reason to be in each other's orbit, and the job actually isn't telling us anything interesting about her.
I think you're 100% right. So I think that one of the things that I was thinking about as I was thinking about books for today, which are not books about wedding planners, is this idea of like show, don't tell, right? Like, if your character is a deeply competent, is a very competent person with a job like fixer, we have got to see that this person is like unflappable, completely focused on their work, in many ways, like intimidating. Like, we have to understand that this person does not slip up. And the reason why we have to understand that is because we're going to see this person slip up if they're a hero.
Yeah. And I think the thing that's interesting to me about Jack as fixer. And I was thinking, it's really, this is why I'm a big rereader in audio if I really loved a book, because I feel like I slow down and pay more attention to it.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things I really like about Jack is one of the ways you know how competent he is how much everybody fucking hates him in that family.
Loathes him.
And you're like, he must be really good at this job. Right. And then I was thinking, and this is like, what's funny? I didn't have time to rewatch it, but have you ever seen the movie Michael Clayton?
I have.
Right? He's a fixer.
Yeah, he is.
And part of the thing that's really interesting about that movie, though, is he's the best fixer in the business. But what he really wants to do is open a restaurant. And he's terrible at that. He actually is like losing his shirt financially because he made this really bad investment, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is like one of the things that's also really interesting is like sort of somebody like right back to it's interesting about character, right? The thing you're really good at is the thing you hate about yourself, or the thing you're really bad at, right? Like, so competence is a particularly interesting lever, I think, with which to talk about this.
With heroes, there is a sense of like competence being a code for them being so buttoned up that we are excited as readers to see them come undone.
I have an example of that. I don't want to talk about it yet because there was one other thing I wanted to talk about, which is, I think, in Georgie All Along, which is a book we've talked about a bunch.
Mm-hmm.
I don't really remember a lot of like real specific lines in a romance. Like, right, this is not really how I typically read. In this book, Levi says something, right? Like, she's sort of talking about like jobs and like, she is left behind, Georgie is left behind this job being like an assistant essentially. And she comes back and she's like sort of saying something about like, well, I could do work like that if I want to. And he like actually like kind of stops dead. Like he doesn't even understand. And he thinks, what's work got to do with wanting? And I really found that book's exploration of the difference between like work versus career to be very, I think, meaningful in a way that romance, I think, always assumes it's a career. And I think this idea of work being different than career is one that that book, I think, is really smart at and purposeful. I think it's like the whole idea of the book is to think about work as being for some people, like they don't want, it's not right. Like work, what does work have to do with wanting? Work is just what you do. And I found that exploration in that book to be probably not something we'll really spend a whole lot of time talking about, but one that I think really changed the way I think about, or maybe just illuminated how often work is being used, or career, as a plot device rather than as a character device, and how much more interesting it is to me to think about it as character.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I think that there's a third version of this, right? This competence / fixer / whatever. And that is the character. And this is something that I'm really interested in. I think there are sort of shades of this in Storms with Jack, is the character who is so good at their job that they play themselves. And then they've done the job so well that once they realize that it's harmed somebody or it's taken them too far down the road and threatened their now like potential romance, potential love, their big feelings, then suddenly they have to reckon with who they have been. And this is where I think something like Morality Chain bumps up against the fixer, right? And we've talked a lot about this recently, not recently. We constantly talk about this difference between like Morality Chain and dark romance. But like, I think that Morality Chain as like, this is where I would say like Joanna Shoup's Criminals, like My Criminals, like people who are writing characters, characters who are in some way in the darkness, right? Like operating in crime. This is where our motorcycle gangs live. Like these kinds of characters who are so good at a job that has questionable morals. And then it fucks them up.
Like sometimes at my like day job, which I'm just like a teacher, but like something happens, right? And I'm just kind of like, oh, should I work here? You know, like all of this stuff. And then I like sort of have these moments where I'm like, it's a job, it's fine. Like I don't, you know what
You're
I
not going
mean?
to
Like,
lose anyone on the table.
right. But also like I like it's capitalism, right? Like it's like I'm doing a task and in exchange I am paid money, and sometimes it's okay to like decouple my feelings from that
Mm-hmm.
because my work, right, the thing that I think I'm like called to do in some way is with the students, right? Like that's the thing. If that was breaking down, then I'd really be like, okay, should I really be here? But like something happening in the larger community of like my school or like with administration or whatever, like I'm just like, I'm never going to agree with all that. That doesn't matter. Like, am I doing like, what is my job? Right. And so I think that that's part of the thing about it too. It's like, right, where is the work being done? And then like, what's, you know, like you said, if you're hurting people doing that work and you just were like, well, I was doing my job, right? It's really interesting to see the intersection of how that can all play out. And I think you're right. Like the morality chain, like they're criminals part of it. But you know what? Like, honestly, if these books were real, every billionaire should be thinking that way.
Right.
Like, why is that gender neutral?
1,000%. As you were talking about that, I was thinking about Heather Greer's preferential treatment, which we did a deep dive of last season. And there's your billionaire, right? Who has to reckon with the fact that he has his very existence is problematic, right? But what's interesting there is the billions, the money is on the table, but the work is not, right? Like Heather Greer isn't interested in what the work is.
Right. Not at all. It's about the money.
She's interested in how the money divests itself in the book, which is, I mean, part of the reason why we did a deep dive on it is because I think this book explores billionairing better than anything I've seen in romance, right? So, but that said, I think like I think what you're absolutely right. Like there is this kind of like, there is in the Venn diagram of whatever it is we're talking about, like there are things that don't exist in this like career sphere, despite being tied to career. And that is, you know, the wedding planner who's just there for plot,
there's a reason why like generic office job,
Gray Enterprise Holdings Limited or whatever, right?
right? Because we don't have to care about the work. We just understand that this is
Right.
like
The
put
hating
people in
game.
proximity.
Interestingly, I don't know what we talked about in season 2, episode 8. But the hating game is on that list. And now, of course, I saw that and I was like, why is the hating game on there? Like, that's not a job about
Yeah.
fixers.
Now you're like, oh, no.
Right? Like, that's not a book about fixers. That's a book about like two people who have a job. But the career doesn't matter in that. Like it's publishing, but it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, right? Because it's about their interactions, right? Like you're human. Well, who's the human you are at work?
Exactly. It's still a banger.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Lumi Gummies.
Consistent, mellow, and super delicious, Lumi gummies are specifically designed to make you feel good, not stoned. Whether you're looking for an end-of-day distressor, a midday mood boost, or help getting the best sleep ever, Lumi Gummies has a strain that is right for you. And I gotta tell you, for the last couple of weeks, obviously, I've been on tour. I've been super sleepy in different time zones, looking for a de-stressor, flying, training, etc. And gummies have been a great help through a lot of that. And then what I would say is last night, so I got home and I have this like weird thing, this weird like pain in my foot. I don't know what I did, but last night it was really painful and I took a gummy before I went to bed and I slept great.
See? I love it. Lumi gummies are also available nationwide. Go to lumigummies.com, that's Lumi gummies.com, and use the code FATEDMATES for 30% off your order. Again, that's lumigummies.com, code FATEDMATES. Lumigummies.com, code FATEDMATES is the way to get to this great, very chill, very mellow experience, whether you are traveling or just sitting at home. So if your podcasting app supports it and you click on the chapter title, we will take you to their site. Thanks to Lumi Gummies for sponsoring this week's episode. Okay, I want to start with a historical, actually, and this is a book that I worked on. So fair, full disclosure, everybody. And it's called Out with Lanterns by Hilary Bowen. And the reason that I was really interested in this is because it approaches competence in a really interesting way, which is the book is a historical set during World War I. Already I was like, whoa, that's kind of crazy, right? And what's happening in the book is that the book starts off with Ophelia living on a farm with other women, and a woman owns the farm. And essentially, this is something called the Women's Land Army. And because men are off at war. And so now women are sort of like doing a lot of, you're right. And we hear this story all the time with World War II, but it happens all the time, right? Men go off to war and women are like kind of left holding the bag. And what's really interesting is that Ophelia is actually like, her father is like wealthier, titled, I don't know, whatever. And she leaves home. She's just like, she wants to force her to marry somebody. And she essentially like has heard some of these women talk. And she's like, I am going to leave home. And I'm essentially, it's like deeply feminist, right? She's like, I'm going to leave home and go do this thing. And she is assigned essentially to this farm. And she knows nothing about anything. But when the book picks up, she is learning. She is essentially like working with the horses, and like is learning to sort of plow. And the book opens with essentially like, some man showing up from like the War Department and being like, you guys have to produce more. You got to produce more food. You're not doing enough. You're going to lose the farm if you don't do it. And in order to help you, we're going to send a soldier who's kind of like home, like injured or whatever, to like kind of make sure you women are doing the right thing. So it like sets up all these really interesting things about the farm and the women on it, and how men can, even though they aren't there, still kind of, tell them what to do. And Ophelia's really like kind of upset with herself. Like, is this my fault?
Interesting.
Am I not competent enough? I've been working so hard to learn how to do this, and now someone else is going to come along. And of course, Silas, the man who is assigned, turns out to be like a childhood friend of hers.
Okay.
And so he'd gone off to war, and then there's all this past behind them, and they have to figure out what it is. And, like you as the reader have to figure out what it is. But he is essentially like it turns out was a tenant farmer on her family's property. And so I don't know. I just really found myself thinking like, here's a book who took the idea in a historical, takes the idea of like women learning how to do things for themselves and work for themselves very seriously. Like, right. Like when you're like, I'm trying so hard to be competent. I'm learning this new thing. Look how much I've learned. And now I'm being told it's not enough. Right. It was a really interesting, and listen, I thought it's beautifully written. I was really interested in World War I as a time, as a time frame for this. But just also, we've heard so much about, Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
But to actually have a book really dive into, here's a girl who walked away from her high class, upper class life. And really was like, I am going to fully throw myself into this as a woman. I thought it was great. So I think it's just it was very powerful to me. I thought it was really and doing something really interesting as a historical romance.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I wasn't actually going to talk about Adriana this week, but since you brought this up, I think the book that just immediately popped into my head that I think is a natural sort of next piece of this is A Tropical Rebel Gets the Duke, right? Where we also have a sort of historical set against a historical backdrop. And I don't, interestingly, in the first version of this Careers and Competence, right, we said yesterday, we were looking at it and we were like, oh, there are a lot of historicals here. But I think that there's something that historicals can do with work that contemporaries can't do, or maybe struggle to do as well. And that is that I'm putting a pin in Adriana for a second while I have a thought, which is, I think that we are so conditioned, whether we like it or not, whether it's historically accurate or not, whether patriarchy or not, to believe that women in the past did not have jobs, right? Like, even though I know better than anybody that women in the past had jobs. Like, their working women worked, like houses. It's 2-income families have been necessary since the dawn of time. Right. So like you have women who, but you see that when you see working women in historicals, you often see them as like servants or, governesses, like people who are hired as in-house help for domestic work. And then the story of them is either that they are wallpaper, right? They're just like secondary care, tertiary, whatever, further down the thing, like along in the background, or it's like, here's a governess and she's going to be taken out of work, right? Like the work is to move her from working to not working. And so I think when you do have a character who is centered on page, who is a heroine, who is working, you end up with a character who is naturally extraordinarily competent, right? Yeah. Because in a historical, a woman with a job is unique in some way. And then in contemporary, it just doesn't read that way, right? But when you think about, so you were talking about like this particular friction in Hillary's book of like a person really like learning a job, right? I think A Tropical Rebel Gets a Duke is a similar situation because Aurora, who is a doctor, who runs an abortion clinic, right, an illegal clinic, and who is on the run for like most of the book from being like, is trying not to get caught, right? Her work is so central to her, not just herself, but also the plot. Right?
Right.
And what's interesting about it is talk about a fixer, talk about a character who has immense power that is subversive in society and essential to not just the conflict, not just the plot of the book and her own character, but also to like the world, right? Like the world of women. And what's really interesting about the play and that Adriana makes in this book is that Apollo is not those things. Apollo cares about the work only because Aurora cares about the work. And it's really interesting because what Adriana has done is sort of created this romance novel where the work is vital to the text. The character who works is immensely qualified and skilled and capable and vital to the survival of many of the people around, like of tons of people around them. And then she is just like wildly loved by this.
It becomes important to him because of how she shows him.
Because of her. Yeah. Apollo had no thoughts whatsoever about abortion before the beginning of this book.
Yeah, that's a great example. Yeah.
I'm realizing like almost all of the books that I have on my list it's the woman who is the important character work-wise.
Yeah.
And I think this is a shift in a generational shift in romance. Because I think probably a decade ago, I would have been like, let's talk about all of these like military dudes who are protecting whatever, you know?
Yeah, I think for me, there's one I have that is it. I mean, both of their work is important, but it's like notable the way he has internalized work.
Yeah. I mean, but I think what is happening here, what is interesting about this is that it's two sides of the same coin, right? It's the character who works. And then there is part of the reason why I think I'm so interested, especially like in cis-het romance, right? About a woman who works and a man who supports her, right? Who will bend over backwards to support her is because of that, right? Like the support, the constant sense of what I choose as my life's work is valid in my partner's eyes, which is a thing that, listen, women don't get. IRL.
This week's episode of Fated Mates is brought to you by Hilary Bowen, author of Out with Lanterns.
So Ophelia Blackwood has a choice. Her father has a parade of ill-advised suitors, and she can choose one of them and get married in England in 1917, or she can seize control of her future and join the war effort with the Women's Land Army. And Olivia makes her choice. She finds camaraderie and confidence through hard work on a farm in Somerset, where she's been assigned to work as part of the ongoing war effort at home. And doing so gives her purpose and independence. But a year into her assignment, Silas Lark arrives, and Ophelia is irritated to discover that he is just as intriguing and attractive as he was when they had an intense summer years ago. But Silas is very different now. He went to war. He was injured on the front lines. He has spent a year rebuilding himself and his confidence, and now he is focused on returning to his work as a tenant farmer. The British government has put him to work on this farm where Ophelia is, and he finds himself thrown together with a woman he can't forget, but somebody who is far different from the young woman that he knew all those years ago. They both have dreams for their future. They have to reckon with what they expect for themselves, what they have expected for themselves. Ophelia doesn't want marriage anymore. Silas isn't sure what is to come now that he's been to war. And these two are going to have to walk through fire if they're going to make it work. And I think they will.
So you heard me talk about this book on the episode, and in a nice confluence of events here, Hilary is advertising on the episode. Out with Lanterns is available in print or wherever books are sold. And if your podcasting app supports it, you can click on the chapter title right now to be taken to buy the book. Thanks to Hilary Bowen for sponsoring this week's episode. I want to talk about the book Single Player by Tara Tai. This is a romance set against the backdrop of like the video game industry. And in this book, Andy and Kat are the two main characters, and they are like sort of famous in the gaming industry. But in particular, one of the things that, so like kind of for their work and what they're known for, but one of the things in particular is that Andy was targeted by essentially like a Gamergate type thing, right? Was found out by like a bunch of men to, right, like doxed, right? Like lots of like really scary, kind of terrifying things. And as a result of this, Andy is very resistant to anything that will put them back in the spotlight, or right, sort of like make them or their gaming product or whatever look weak. And I can't it's funny, I didn't reread for this. I sort of just like look back at kind of some old notes, but one of the things that's interesting about this is that if I'm remembering correctly, Andy is like sort of ANDI, and I think like their name is sort of gender neutral. And one of the reasons that these like men in the gaming industry turned against her was they discovered that even though in the book they're kind of like maybe female presenting non-binary, so Andy goes by she and sometimes by they, is they felt, these men, that like, oh my God, this is a woman, how dare. And so one of the things as a result of this is that Andy has really pulled away at all from any kind of anything that will kind of put them back in the spotlight. And, you know, so what happens is she's working on a new game, and Kat is hired by the company, I think, if I'm remembering this correctly, to come in and essentially like add a love interest into the game. And Andy is like, well, I don't fucking want that. I never wanted that. And so Andy's way of dealing with this is to essentially just ignore Kat. Like, I'm just gonna pretend this isn't happening, because Andy is like, has some big, you know, she doesn't run the company, but like it's her game, right? It's Andy's game. It's their game. They just think like, if I ignore this long enough, they can't force me to do it. I'm the director or whatever of the game. And Kat is, of course, now this is the part that's really interesting. So Andy is presented as very on top of things, very, right? Very competent as like a person who knows how to write and like create a game. But what Kat is competent at is like writing love into the games. She's like had a lot of success doing this. And so now what I really liked about this in terms of like the, you know, this is a very slow burn romance. This is in a lot of ways was like kind of, you know, like not necessarily hitting like the pacing kind of things that like I typically would like prefer in a romance, but you have two real people who are really competent and good at what they are good at, but because they have different beliefs, we see the tension between them, right? So Kat is like, adding love to this game is going to make it better. And Andy is like, absolutely fucking not. It's going to ruin everything. Right. And so,
right.
And so one of the things that I really thought was really interesting about this is you essentially have two competent people on opposite sides of like what seems like a divide they will never be able to figure out or cross. And what ends up happening is like they go to a gaming conference and it's in Las Vegas, and, you know, finally they figure it all out. But I really was very won over. In particular, it was very memorable to me how frustrated Kat was becoming at work, knowing that she was being boxed out from doing the very thing she'd been hired to do. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so, of course.
Yeah, it's if you're a gaming person, I think you would really enjoy it.
There are so many books. Is this recent?
I think it was from the beginning of this year. Like maybe it's from 6 or 8 months ago. Maybe.
Yeah. This is really interesting. Gaming is really becoming, I mean, I think this is a completely separate thing, everybody. This is a different episode. But gaming is really becoming very present in romance in a way that it like hasn't in the past. And I think this might be sort of related to the pandemic in some way also. But I'm really interested. This is one of those things. Everybody knows that I have like a list of things that I'm paying attention to in romance, and gaming is one of them. So I'm excited you talked about that. All right, let's talk about a true fixer. A true fixer. And that is, I want to talk about Kelly Bowen and her Duke of My Heart, which is the first book in her Season for Scandal series. And before I talk about the book itself, I just want to say, like, those of you who are out there who are thinking about historicals and going like, I'm so sad there just aren't as many being released. Like, you may not know about Kelly Bowen, and you should, because this is a woman who knows how to write a historical. And she now writes historical novels, but you can go back and read, I think she's written 6 or 8 historical romances, and they're all terrific. But Duke of My Heart came out, I don't know, God, maybe a decade ago. And the hero of this book is a sea captain. Listen, not a pilot.
Not a pilot.
A real deal sea captain, a man who is a duke, the eponymous Duke of her heart. And he is like, talk about just like mega competent. And here's what I would say is a competent heroine, and that is what I'm going to talk about in this book, matched with a man who is so buttoned up that they are just like, that they become pure exasperation, is like exactly the match I want. Anyway, so he is a duke and he has an errant younger sister who is just like chaos. And he spends most of his time just like not paying that much attention to the dukedom because he likes being on a ship. So like he's sailing around the world. He's like battling pirates. He's doing whatever. He comes home. He is duke. He walks into his home and discovers a naked man dead and tied to his missing sister's bed. So it's clear that there have been at least two scandals in this house. Namely, somehow his sister landed with this naked man in her bed, and two, now that man is dead, right? And that man is an earl, right? And also the sister is missing. Except he can't really do anything about any of this, because if he raises any fuss at all, the whole world is going to know what went down. So he has one place to go, and that is to Miss Ivory Moore's detective agency. And Ivory is she's not really a detective. She's a flat out fixer. Like, she's crisis PR. You go to Ivory when you need something covered up, a little bit of scandal washed away. You need, basically she's like known as like a person who can fix basically anything. And so what happens is he goes to her, and this is another kind of really good example of how gender works itself through a lot of these books in historicals, because when he gets to her, he's sort of pissed off that he has to see her, that she's the person who is going to have to he's going to have to sort of like prostrate himself.
I'm sorry, I laughed like that.
Exactly. So Ivory is so smart. She is so funny. She is so clever. She is basically like the person. So he goes to get her and he's like, I need help. And she's like, no problem. A dead body. I've done this before. So like in she goes to snatch up this body. The Earl is married and known. And then kind of ends up getting tied up in this kind of, well, now that we've solved the problem of where to put the dead Earl's body, right? Now we have to find this woman. Like, is she missing? Is she missing because she ran? Is she missing because she's been kidnapped? Like, what are the things that are happening? And Ivory has handled all of this before. And even if she hasn't handled quite a situation like this, she's handled it. She's very clever. Max, however, is like, women don't get into trouble.
Yeah, of course.
Like, men are the ones who do dangerous work. And so he is like off his game, knocked back really fast. And it's a really fun read because of it, because like he can't quite get his footing around her. He is regularly just like overwhelmed by her choices, by her skills, by the things she is willing to do in order to save his sister for money. And then of course, like there's this added bonus here, which is, and this is true of any book where there is like a really truly skilled person in trade or in work, where there are a bunch of other people who work around Ivory, right? Who are really great secondary characters. And so, like this is a book where it's the first in a series that just paints this like beautiful big picture of a world. And you get a real sense that for every book that Kelly writes in this series, like you are going to be playing in this like ever expanding world, which of course is also another favorite experience for me. But I mean, Ivory just knows the job and she is unwilling to compromise. And I think that that's something really lovely too about these books that have heroines whose jobs are so essential, or who like heroines who are this kind of competent, like the absolute unwillingness to sacrifice that competence or to cede it in any way is really lovely to read in 2025.
I love that she's the fixer.
Yeah. I mean, but of course, right? Like,
right.
She can move in and out of these houses without anybody noticing. Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition, right? Like,
sure.
Nobody expects a woman to have any power in any of these situations. And so she actually like is able to seamlessly fix. And you know, this is my kink. A heroine who has a lot of power and knows how to use it.
All right. I'm going to talk about Hugs and Kisses by Farah Roshan, which just came out last week. And everybody, I'm sure you all are completely aware that I love Farah Roshan so much so that I'm like reading these books about dogs. I don't know. This series is set in New Orleans. And in this case, I'm not gonna lie to you, I was really drawn in by the beginning of this book in particular because Evie comes home and finds her fiance in her bed, right, with another woman. And she is so frozen and she kind of like backs up, like, right, like backs up and backs out of the house and is like, and then she's like, what the fuck am I doing? Right. And so then she like kind of re-enters and sees, you know, I don't even remember this dirtbag's name anymore. And he tries to like, you know, gaslight her. Like, what are you doing home in the middle of the day? And she's like, why are you naked in the kitchen in the middle of the day? The interaction between them lets us know that Evie has sort of put up with a lot from this man. And he thinks he's going to be able to like sort of walk, you know, kind of like talk his way out of whatever this is. And she like throws him out and is like, you can come back and get your shit later and forget it. And the thing then that is really interesting is that she is a veterinarian and she works for him, or they work together at his practice or something. And they do not have a pet of their own. And the thing that's really interesting is at this moment, all she wants is to like, if this had not just happened, I would go into work and I'd hang out with the dogs. Yeah. But I can't because he's there. And now I'm not going to be able to go back there, right? And so one of the things that was really brilliant, I think, about this setup, this book, I mean, along with her, like, throwing that on his ass and threatening to, like, you know, kill him and stuff, which I enjoyed a lot, is here, Evie is now in this position of the thing she is most competent and good at is now going to be removed from her because of her interpersonal problems. And so now what, right? Now what? And I just found this really interesting, almost in like kind of the inverse way of what we've been talking about, right? Which is like the thing that's going to make me feel better and like ground me and make me, you know, kind of find myself again, I can't access anymore. And then she has this like sort of like, and she lies to her best friend Ashanti, who owns like this Buckingham Palace. So she can't go back there, which is, you know, she's like, I just lied to my friend and said I was, you know, not feeling well, so I can't go there. And then she realizes she can go back to this place that she used to volunteer when she was like getting her license or whatever.